There's a quiet law at work in the universe, one that rarely announces itself, yet changes everything in a single, breathless instant. For most of our days, life moves in steady lines, step by step, inch by inch. We learn slowly, we heal. Slowly, we grow, slowly. It feels predictable, almost mechanical. But hidden inside that rhythm, there are moments, rare, dazzling moments, when everything shifts all at once. A sudden knowing, a decision that changes your entire direction. A spark of inspiration that wasn't there the moment before. Science has a name for this kind of transformation, the quantum leap. Not the slow climb, but the sudden jump, the instant when an electron vanishes from one orbit and appears in another, without crossing the space between. Tonight we'll drift through the soft, strange corridors of this truth. We'll see how the smallest particles in the universe defy logic, how reality itself bends for them, and how, perhaps, our lives do the same. This is not just physics. This is a gentle unveiling of how change, real, irreversible change, happens quietly, instantly, beautifully. Before we begin, let this be more than a lesson. If you feel a quiet longing for transformation, stay with me. This will be slow, calm, and filled with wonder. If this story stays with you, I hope you'll like this video, share it with someone who might need its quiet spark, and subscribe. Not for numbers, but because there are truths like this that deserve to be heard while the world is sleeping. And if a thought, a memory, or a question rises while you listen, leave it in the comments before you drift away. I read them all, and they are part of the constellation this channel is building. So, breathe deeply. Let your shoulders loosen. Let your mind open like a window at night. We're about to step, not walk, into another orbit. Let's begin. Learn about the quantum leap is real. Chapter 1: The stillness before the jump. The night is so still you can almost hear the sky breathing. Somewhere on the far edge of the city, past the hum of traffic and the restless glow of streetlights, an old observatory waits in silence. Its dome, painted the color of pale bone, catches the faintest silver from the moon. Inside, the air smells faintly of dust and cool metal, the scent of instruments that have watched the stars longer than most lives have lasted. You walk softly, here as though sound itself has thinned. Your footsteps echo gently against the wooden floor, the boards creaking in the patient way of things that have been holding the same weight for decades. In the center, a telescope rests, its long neck tilted upward, gazing toward something beyond human reach. It feels like stepping into a sanctuary, not one built for worship of gods, but for reverence toward the patterns of the universe. The caretaker of this place, an old man with eyes that have seen more moonrises than sunsets, told you once that the real magic isn't in the moment we see the stars, but in the stillness before we look. The seconds when your eyes adjust, when your breath quiets, when you let the noise of the day fade away until all that's left is the hush that precedes wonder. This stillness is where the leap begins. In the world of physics, a quantum leap is a strange thing. We think of change as something we can trace. A line from point A to point B. We imagine watching a ball roll across a table, or the second hand sweeping its slow circle across the clock face. Movement, in our minds, happens along a path. But at the smallest scales, where atoms hum and electrons spin, the universe refuses to follow the paths we expect. Here, change doesn't always travel. Sometimes it jumps. Picture an electron, invisible, dancing in its quiet orbit around the nucleus of an atom. It moves within a shell, bound by the laws of quantum mechanics, each orbit like a rung on an invisible ladder. Normally, we might expect it to slide up or down that ladder, touching every step in between. But that is not what happens. When enough energy arrives, a spark of light, a photon, or a sudden shift, the electron disappears from where it was and reappears in another place entirely. It does not pass through the space between. It does not take time to travel. It is simply there and then there. For centuries, this baffled scientists. Even now, it feels less like a mechanical process and more like a kind of magic. But it is not magic. It is the fabric of reality itself, revealing that it is far stranger and perhaps more beautiful than our everyday senses can comprehend. The telescope hums faintly as you adjust its angle. Outside, the night seems infinite. The stars are scattered in such abundance that you feel as though you're peering into some vast river of light, frozen mid-current, and yet every star you see is itself a leap, a fusion reaction ignited. Billions of years ago, photons bursting from its heart and leaping across impossible distances to meet your eyes now. In a way, every glimmer is a reminder. Leaps happen all the time. In silence, without fanfare, without your permission or awareness. The stillness before them is not empty, it is charged. There is something deeply human in this idea. Think of the moments before your life changed, before you said yes or no, before you left or stayed, before you knew something you could never unknow. Weren't they often quiet? A quiet train ride before you met the person who would change everything. A still afternoon before the call that brought news you didn't expect. An evening walk before a decision that would alter the map of your future. Like electrons, we spend most of our time circling in the orbits we know. They feel safe, predictable, familiar. We imagine that to reach another orbit, we must cross every point in between. That growth must be a slow climb. But sometimes, when the right kind of energy arrives, we simply jump. We do not crawl our way to the new version of ourselves. We vanish from oneself and appear in another. Scientists describe this with equations, with the careful language of wave functions and discrete energy states. But lying here in the observatory, watching the faint glow of the Andromeda galaxy, through the lens, you begin to feel it not as math, but as a kind of music. Imagine it. Each electron is like a note, held in the deep, sustained hum of the universe. Then, with the right spark, the note changes instantly, not sliding, but shifting into a new pitch altogether. The melody changes. The song itself transforms. It makes you wonder if the smallest particles in the universe can leap without crossing the space in between. Why do we believe that our own changes must always be gradual? Why do we doubt the possibility of waking up one day and finding ourselves on an entirely different rung of life's ladder? A moth brushes against the glass window near the dome, its wings tapping in slow, irregular beats. You can almost hear them, delicate as a whisper, in the deep quiet. Outside, a thin mist begins to settle over the hill. The grass darkens under its touch, and the air takes on that metallic scent that always precedes rain, even if rain will never come tonight. In this silence, you can almost believe you're watching the earth itself hold its breath, waiting for something invisible to shift. In the early 20th century, Niels Bohr introduced the idea that electrons occupy discrete energy levels, that they cannot exist in between. At first, it sounded absurd. How could something move without crossing space? But experiment after experiment confirmed it. The hydrogen atom, with its lone electron, became the simplest stage for this strange performance. When the atom absorbs energy, the electron leaps to a higher energy state. Later, it falls back, releasing a photon, a tiny packet of light in the process. This is how stars shine, how neon signs glow, how the auroras paint the sky. It is the pulse of the universe, hidden in the smallest things. Every leap begins with stillness. Every stillness carries the possibility of light. You lean back from the telescope, your eyes adjusting to the naked sky again. The stars above blur and sharpen as you blink. For a moment, you imagine the atoms in your own body performing their quiet leaps, trillions of them, every second, each an invisible flash of movement and energy. It's strange to think that your existence is not a smooth, continuous flow, but a collection of countless small jumps happening in the dark. You are not as solid as you feel. You are a cloud of possibilities, resolving into reality moment by moment. Perhaps that's why change so often feels disorienting. We expect to feel every step, every gradient. But maybe the truth is that some part of us simply vanishes from where it was and appears somewhere new, and the mind takes time to catch up. The old man appears at the door of the observatory. He doesn't speak. He just stands there, wrapped in a long coat, his silhouette outlined against the dim light. From the hallway, his presence feels like part of the stillness, as though he has been standing there forever and only now revealed himself. You glance at him, and he gives the faintest nod, an acknowledgement, a confirmation of something unspoken. Then he steps inside and moves to the telescope, his hands finding the adjustments without looking. He peers through it for a moment, then steps back and gestures for you to look again. You do, and in the place where the faint glow of Andromeda had been, there is now a cluster of bright stars you hadn't noticed before. They seem sharper, closer, almost breathing. Sometimes, he says softly, his voice like paper sliding over wood, all you have to do is change where you're looking. The universe does the rest. And with that, he leaves you alone again. The words linger. Change where you're looking. It's not about forcing movement or straining toward the next thing. Sometimes it's about adjusting your focus until the leap can happen on its own. Like an electron, you wait until the right kind of light touches you, and then, without effort, you are elsewhere. You sit in that thought for a long while, letting it sink deeper. Around you, the observatory breathes in its wooden stillness. The telescope stands sentinel. The night sky, ancient and unhurried, turns fraction by fraction overhead. You are in the stillness before the jump, and perhaps you always have been. The quantum leap is real, not just in atoms, but in the spaces of your life that you cannot yet name. And here, under the cold silver of the stars, you are reminded that the stillness is not the absence of motion, it is the place where possibility gathers, waiting for its moment to appear. Somewhere an electron shifts, somewhere a photon is born, and somewhere in you, unseen, a leap is preparing to begin. Chapter 2. When the particle disappears. The wind has shifted. Outside the observatory, it moves in long, unbroken sighs, brushing through the trees in waves so gentle they sound like breathing. Somewhere far below, in the valley, a river glints, faintly in the moonlight, winding through darkness, as if it too were traveling in its sleep, inside. The air is still thick with the kind of silence that makes every small sound bloom. The soft hum of the telescope, the faint crack of cooling wood in the rafters, your own pulse steady and low. Somewhere in the background of your awareness, you rest your hands on the railing, looking out at the stars through the open slit of the dome, and you think of something impossible, that even as you stand here, particles all around you and within you are disappearing, not vanishing forever, not crumbling into nothing, but slipping in an instant from one state to another, from one orbit to a different one, without crossing the space between it, is one of the most counterintuitive truths in physics. In our visible world, we cannot imagine motion without a path. Even a bird in flight must traverse the air between branches. A drop of rain falls through every point between the cloud and the soil. Every journey seems bound by the logic of continuity. But at the scale of the quantum, in the smallest, most secretive realms of matter that logic breaks, electrons do not migrate step by step. They do not glide from here to there. They are here, and then they are there. The in-between is not part of their story. To our minds, trained by years of watching rivers flow and shadows stretch, this feels like a violation. We crave the trail, the footprint, the bridge between two places. But the quantum world is not bound by our comfort with sequences. It leaps. Imagine it now. You are drifting closer to an atom, past the whirling cloud of electrons, until you are so near that the vast empty spaces between nucleus and orbit become an ocean of possibility. You fix your gaze on a single electron, suspended in the probability cloud. Its position never truly certain until the moment it is observed. Then, without warning, it vanishes from where it was. You search for the motion, for the path of its flight, but there is nothing to see. In the blink of an instant, it has appeared in a higher orbit, energized by the absorption of a photon. No trace, no trail, just absence, and then presence elsewhere. Physicists describe this as a quantum jump, but the word jump is misleading. It is not a leap in the sense of a body arcing through space. It is a sudden shift in being, a redefinition of location, instant and complete. Long ago, when the idea was first proposed, it was met with disbelief. Niels Bohr and his contemporaries were trying to reconcile the strange behavior of atoms with the rigid laws of classical physics. How could something exist in two separate states without touching the continuum between them? The answer came not through logic alone, but through the strange, stubborn precision of experiment. Hydrogen, the simplest atom, showed that its electrons occupied specific, discrete energy levels. Shine light of just the right frequency upon it, and the electron would absorb that energy and reappear at a higher level. Shine another frequency, and nothing happened. It was all or nothing, presence or absence, here or there, and so, against the grain of centuries of thought, we learned that the universe, at its foundation, does not always move through the spaces between. The night outside seems to agree. One moment, a thin veil of cloud hides the stars. The next, the sky is clear again, as if the clouds were never there. You did not see them drift away. You did not watch them dissolve. They were here, and now they are not. The absence feels familiar now, as though nature is whispering that disappearance is not always destruction. Sometimes it is transformation. You think of the countless small vanishings in your own life, the fears that seemed permanent until they were gone, the habits you carried for years, only to one day realize they no longer fit you, the way grief once. An unbroken ocean eventually leaves islands of peace in its wake, not by erosion you can witness, but by some invisible rearrangement. Maybe, like the electron, we change, not through constant visible motion, but in sudden, quiet shifts. One version of us disappears, and another appears in its place. A memory stirs of the first time you learned about quantum jumps. It was not in a lecture hall, nor from a textbook. It was on a rainy afternoon, curled up with an old science book from a second-hand shop. The pages smelled faintly of dust and something older, something like time itself. There, between diagrams of orbits and lines of tiny numbers, was the description: an electron, upon gaining or losing the right amount of energy, moves from one allowed energy state to another without occupying the states in between. You read it again and again, not because you understood it entirely, but because it felt like a secret, something the universe had been doing all along, hidden in plain sight, waiting for someone to notice. Even now, years later, it still feels like a secret. Inside the observatory, the old man's voice comes again, drifting from somewhere in the dark. You cannot see it happen, he says. Not because it is too fast, though it is, but because there is no happening to see. There is only the before and the after. You turn toward the sound, but he is not in sight. Only his words remain, settling into the quiet like leaves landing on water. No happening, only before and after. The idea unsettles something in you, but it also calms you, perhaps because you have spent so much of your life in the before, straining to see the gradual unfolding of change, waiting for proof that something is shifting, watching for signs. But maybe the shift, when it comes, will have no signs at all. It will simply be. One day you will wake up and be elsewhere, in a self you could not have stepped to, only leaped into. Like the particle, you will disappear from one orbit and appear in another, as natural and precise as the laws of quantum mechanics themselves. The air grows colder as the hours pass. You wrap a blanket around your shoulders, the fabric rough and warm against your skin. In the distance, the horizon begins to pale, not yet with sunrise, but with the faint silver that comes when the night begins to loosen its hold. You think of the photons that will soon break over this hill, each one the result of quantum leaps. Within the sun, electrons absorbing and releasing light across unimaginable distances. The dawn itself is a cascade of vanishings and appearances, written in the smallest particles, repeated trillions of times until it becomes something we can see. This is the hidden rhythm of reality. Somewhere in the deep machinery of your mind, you sense that this principle, the disappearance and reappearance without passage, might explain more than atoms. Perhaps it is also why love sometimes feels instantaneous, why inspiration can arrive in a single, breath-held moment, why courage appears fully formed in a situation where moments before there was only fear. The leap does not announce itself. The leap is the announcement. And you, standing here in the fading night, begin to feel that you, too, are preparing to disappear, not from the world, but from one version of yourself into another. The river below catches the first faint shimmer of light. It gleams for a heartbeat, then the shimmer vanishes as a cloud passes. No gradual dimming, just gone. You watch the water for a while longer, knowing the shimmer will return in an instant when the light shifts again. This is the way of it. The vanishing is never the end. It is simply the pause between appearances. You close your eyes and breathe in the cold morning air. Somewhere inside you, a photon is being released. Somewhere inside you, an electron has shifted its orbit. You will never see it happen. You will only live in the before and after, and maybe that is enough. The particle disappears, and in that disappearance, everything begins. Chapter 3. the ocean of possibilities. There are nights when the sky feels close enough to touch, not because the stars have moved, but because your mind has. Tonight is one of them. The dome of the observatory has been left open, and the darkness above looks less like a ceiling and more like a grate. Deep water, black and infinite, holding currents we cannot see. You lean back in the chair beside the telescope, the old wood creaking softly under your weight. Your hands are folded in your lap. The stillness from before lingers, but something new has entered it. Not motion exactly, but a sense of expansion, as though the air has thinned, and there is suddenly more room for thought. In this space, you begin to think about the strange idea physicists call superposition. Imagine a small boat floating in a calm harbor. In our everyday world, the boat can be in only one place at a time, tied to one dock, anchored in one patch of water. But in the quantum world, the boat could be everywhere in the harbor at once, its reality spread across all possible positions. An electron, unmeasured, is like that. It does not have a single, definite location or even a single, definite state. Instead, it exists as a wave of probabilities, a shimmering map of could-be that covers all the places it might appear. It is not until we look, until we measure, that the wave collapses, and the electron chooses one place to be. This is the ocean of possibilities. Your eyes close, and you imagine drifting inside it, not on the surface of an ordinary sea, but in something wider, stranger, and far more silent. The water here is not water, it is potential. It is made of all the choices that have not yet been made, all the realities that have not yet been chosen. Each ripple is a path your life could take. Each current is a decision, waiting to carry you toward one shore or another. You reach out your hand in the dark and feel nothing but air, yet in your mind you feel the cold, weightless touch of that ocean's surface. Somewhere in its depths, every possible version of you already exists, suspended like luminous fish, waiting for the moment you look at them and bring one into being in quantum mechanics. This strange truth is expressed through the wave function, a mathematical description of all the states a system could be in. Before observation, the system is not in one state or another. It is in all of them at once. Only when measured does it collapse into one reality. To our ordinary senses, this is absurd. We are used to objects being where they are, doing what they are doing. We don't think of a cup on the table as also existing in mid-air or in someone else's hand or shattered on the floor. But in the quantum world, until the act of observation fixes reality, all those possibilities are somehow real. It is as if the universe itself hesitates before deciding. The old man's voice returns, softer than before, as though carried by the currents of your own thoughts. The ocean doesn't care which wave reaches the shore, he says. It holds them all. The choice comes when something meets it, feels it, names it. You open your eyes, but the room is empty. Only the stars beyond the dome remain, their light drifting toward you from impossible distances. Each photon is a messenger from a decision already made, a wave that has already collapsed, a reality that has already been chosen. And yet, around you, within you, the unchosen still hums. You think back to moments in your life when many futures were possible. A crossroads where you could not see beyond the next turn. A conversation that could have ended in love or silence. A chance you could have taken but didn't. Perhaps those other futures still exist. Somewhere in the ocean, not as ghosts of regret, but as parallel notes in a larger song. Maybe you are not so much choosing reality as tuning it, the way a musician might bring one string into harmony with the rest. Outside, the night deepens. The sky feels less like a void and more like a vast aquarium, each star a point of light, refracted through water. You imagine swimming among them, your body moving without resistance. The distances between worlds folding and unfolding like currents in a tide. Somewhere ahead, you see two glimmers, two possible shores. One feels familiar, the other is strange and shining. In the ocean of possibilities, you could drift toward either. But you do not yet move. You float, suspended between choices, letting the water hold you. In experiments, superposition has been shown with particles of light, with electrons, even with molecules made of dozens of atoms. The principle holds. Until we look, they are many things at once. And when we look, we see only one, the one we have, in some way, called into being. It is tempting to imagine that our lives work the same way, that each decision we make is the collapse of a larger wave, a choice among countless others that will never be seen. If that is true, then maybe the most important moments are not the ones where we force a choice, but the ones where we allow the ocean to carry us until we know, without doubt, which wave to ride. You stand and walk to the telescope, its cool metal body steady under your hands. Through it, you see a dense cluster of stars, so many that the darkness between them almost disappears. For a moment, it is hard to tell where one star ends and another begins. This, too, is a kind of superposition, not in the scientific sense, but in the way your eyes blur the boundaries, holding many points of light together in one shimmering whole. It is only when you focus sharply that each becomes distinct. The thought makes you smile. Even in the vastness of the cosmos, the act of looking changes what you see. The wind outside shifts again, bringing with it a scent of pine and something colder, the smell of snow in the high air. It drifts through the open slit of the dome and settles in the room like a ghost of winter. You breathe it in, and for a moment you are a child again, watching the first flakes fall in the lamplight outside your window. That memory, like the electron's state before observation, might have remained anywhere in the ocean of your mind, but something in the scent brought it to the surface, collapsing it into the present. It reminds you that observation is not always done with the eyes. Sometimes it is done with the heart. You close the dome slowly, the gears turning with a soft, resonant click. The stars vanish one by one until the slit is sealed and the roof is whole again. Inside, the darkness becomes complete. You sit in it for a while, breathing, feeling the weight of the unchosen possibilities that still exist beyond these walls. They are not lost. They are simply unobserved. Somewhere in the ocean, every version of tomorrow is already waiting. And in your own time, you will meet one of them, draw it close, and let it become real. The ocean of possibilities does not rush. It moves at the speed of wonder. Chapter 4. Entangled across the stars. The night sky has always been a kind of mirror. Not a flat reflection like a lake at dawn, but a mirror stretched so far into the dark that what it shows us is both ourselves and not ourselves. Every point of light is an echo of something so impossibly far away. Its past and its present are tangled in a way our minds can barely hold, and yet, on quiet nights, when the air is still enough that the leaves stop there, restless rustling, and the street outside falls into silence, we can almost hear it, a hum, a low ancient resonance in our bones. a reminder that nothing in this universe is ever truly separate from anything else. The physicists have a name for this entanglement, a word that sounds like it should belong to poetry but instead lives in equations. In the simplest telling, it means this: two particles, born together or made to interact, can become linked so completely that no matter how far apart they drift, their states are still one story. Change one, and the other changes instantly, as if distance has no meaning. We call this spooky action at a distance, because even Einstein, who mapped the curvature of space itself, found it unsettling. It challenges the neat borders of cause and effect. It whispers that separation might be an illusion, but here's the thing. Entanglement isn't only written in the language of photons and spins. It is also written in the small, unrecorded moments of our lives. There are people, you know this, whose thoughts arrive in your head before they speak. There are connections you can't explain with logic alone. A friend who texts you seconds after you think of them. A parent who wakes in the night just as their child stirs in another room. A lover whose breath catches at the same moment yours does, even miles apart. These moments feel rare, but perhaps they are simply the places where we notice the entanglement that has been there all along. When two particles become entangled, their link is not one of chains or cords. There is nothing physical binding them. Instead, their connection exists in the invisible, in the wave function that describes them both at once. To imagine this, picture a dance where each partner moves not in response to the other, but as if both steps were decided before the music even began. Now stretch that thought further, beyond particles, beyond the scale of atoms, to the drifting countenance of your own life. Every conversation you've ever had, every shared glance on a train, every time you handed someone a pen or held a door open without thinking. These moments scatter across time and space, but they don't vanish. They remain in the fabric of your being, as real as the scar on your hand or the way your voice sounds when you are tired. I like to imagine that in the same way two electrons can be bound in a single description, two people can be bound in a single thread of memory, not in a mystical way, though it might feel like magic, but in the honest physics of shared existence. You walk through the world, leaving invisible traces behind you, and you carry traces of others as well. These are your entanglements. In the early days of quantum theory, experiments to test entanglement were clumsy, like trying to measure a heartbeat with the thud of a drum. But as technology grew delicate enough to catch the smallest shivers of a photon, the experiments became more precise. In one, a pair of photons is created in a single burst of energy. They are born spinning in perfect balance, like twins on opposite ends of a seesaw. The photons are sent in opposite directions, perhaps to two labs a kilometer apart. When one is measured, its spin is fixed, and instantly, without delay, the other photon's spin is also fixed, always opposite, always complementary. It does not matter whether the distance between them is 1 meter or the width of the galaxy. The change is simultaneous. The thread is unbroken. The human heart understands this, even if our equations still stumble over it because we have felt it when someone we love is far away. And yet the moment they are in pain, we feel a strange hollowness in our chest. When a song plays in a crowded cafe, and it's the exact one that carries the memory of a night you both swore you'd never forget. We do not need to see the thread to know it's there, and perhaps this is the greater lesson hidden in quantum entanglement, that separation is not a truth, but an arrangement. We are trained to see boundaries between nations, between bodies, between me and you, but the smallest units of the universe do not obey these lines. In their language, there is no such thing as a part. Think about the starlight above you. It has traveled for years, sometimes millions of them, to meet your eyes tonight. The photon that just touched your retina might have left its star before the first forests grew on Earth. And yet, it did not lose its identity in the journey. It did not stop being part of the system that birthed it. You are, right now, entangled with the history of the cosmos. Every breath you take contains atoms once forged in the core of a star and scattered by its death. Every molecule of water in your body has been sipped by countless other living things, by a bird in the Amazon, by a child in ancient China, by something with no name swimming in a prehistoric sea. You have never truly been alone. Entanglement also asks us to rethink time. If two particles can share a state instantaneously, then the chain of before and after is not as rigid as it seems. It suggests a deeper order, one where events are not bound to the ticking of a clock, but to the quiet agreements woven into the structure of the universe. And isn't that how some memories feel? A smell, a sound, and suddenly you are there, years, collapsing in on themselves. The moment has no distance from you, it has only been folded, waiting for your hand to smooth it open again. I once read about an experiment where scientists kept a sample of human DNA in a lab and measured tiny electrical responses as the donor experienced emotional changes elsewhere. The responses mirrored each other as if the DNA still remembered the body it came from, as if distance was irrelevant to its knowing. We may argue about the interpretation, but the story hums with a truth we already feel in our bones. Connection is not something you build, it is something you uncover. Imagine two travelers standing on different planets in different galaxies. No technology can bridge them, but if they were once entangled, if their atoms once touched, if their lives once crossed even for a moment, then somewhere, in some hidden register of the universe, their positions are still part of the same sentence. Perhaps this is why farewells rarely feel complete. We may part in body, but in the quantum ledger, the connection remains. You might be thinking now of someone you no longer speak to, someone whose life has veered far from yours. And yet, if they walked into the room, your pulse would skip as if the time between you had been an illusion. In the physical sense, you have been strangers for years, but in the deeper architecture of reality, you are still in orbit of the same center. This does not mean all entanglements are gentle. Some are sharp, like a wire pulled too tight. They tug at you when you least expect it. They remind you of things you'd rather forget, but even then, there is a strange beauty in knowing that the threads exist at all, that in the vast silence of space, something still connects you. If we could see these threads, if they glowed like copper filaments, I think the sky would be full of them. Webs of light stretching from star to star, from one heartbeat to another, from the curl of a leaf in one hemisphere to the opening of a flower in another. Perhaps the universe would look less like emptiness and more like lace. Entanglement also teaches patience. In the equations, there is no urgency, no clock to outrun. The link simply is. Whether the particles are near or far, whether we measure them now or years from now, their states remain woven together. Maybe this is why some bonds survive long silences, why some friendships pick up exactly where they left off. The entanglement was never undone. It only drifted quietly, waiting for you to notice it again. As you lie here tonight, listening to the slow rhythm of your breathing, You can imagine yourself as part of this lattice of unseen connections. Every inhale, a gathering of particles from far-off places. Every exhale, a gift of yourself to the air that will carry it onward, perhaps to be breathed in by someone you will never meet. The air is an archive of all the lives that have touched it, and so is the light. Photons bounce from surface to surface, from star to planet to skin. Right now, light that once touched the ocean's surface might be touching your hand. Light that once reflected from someone's eyes might be entering yours. You are already a meeting place for the universe. We often think of space as separation, the gap between stars, the stretch between planets, the pause between words. But, in the quantum view, space is simply the stage on which connection plays out. The real story is not in the emptiness, but in the threads. When morning comes, you may forget most of this. The equations, the photons, the quiet hum of the night sky. But perhaps you'll remember that somewhere in the deep structure of things, you are already bound to more than you can see. And maybe, just maybe, you will move through your day with the quiet confidence of someone who knows they are entangled across the stars. Chapter 5: Becoming the Leap. It begins not in the moment you decide to jump, but in the quiet hours before, when the air is still, when nothing around you tells you that you are ready. And yet, there is a slow, undeniable hum beneath your skin. The leap is not a single act, but a becoming. It is the way you stop standing on the shore, toes curled in the sand, waiting for a sign that will never arrive. It is the way you realize that certainty is not the point, that perhaps certainty has been the enemy all along. And so, you begin to move, not because the world has promised you safety, but because your bones whisper to you, you cannot stay here any longer. The truth about leaps is that they never come dressed as opportunities wrapped in golden light. They arrive as discomfort, as restlessness, as a deep fatigue toward your own excuses. They arrive as the unbearable knowledge that the life you are living is smaller than the one you are capable of holding. For days, maybe weeks, you circle the idea, you measure the height of the ledge, you count the risks in the air like beads on a string. You imagine what it might feel like to fall, and then, in the smallest of moments, something shifts. It might be a conversation that rattles the walls you've built, or a dream so vivid that you wake up with your heart pounding, or a silence that feels so loud you realize it's trying to speak to you. That is when you begin the slow work of becoming the leap, the dissolving of the shore. Before any leap, there is a letting go of the ground beneath you, not physically, but in your mind. You start to see the shore for what it truly is, not a place of safety, but a place of limitation. The shore whispers, "Stay, you know me, you know my tides," but you begin to notice the shore has kept you in a loop. The same conversations, the same sunsets, the same versions of yourself over and over, until they no longer feel alive. It is here that fear disguises itself as comfort. The shore is familiar, but it is not kind. You realize you have built your life in a small circle, and while it feels steady, it also feels airless. To become the leap is to first see that the shore was never your final destination. It was only a waiting room, and no matter how comfortable the chairs, you were never meant to live your whole life sitting in one. The gathering of momentum. Leaps are not taken in an instant, they are built like storms. Quietly at first, then all at once. Every day you feel the pull toward the edge, even if you resist it. You notice yourself thinking less about how high the fall might be and more about what waits on the other side. You collect pieces of courage without realizing it. The night you say no when you would have once said yes. The morning you open the window to let in air you were afraid to breathe. The conversation where you speak your truth and watch it land in the world without shattering you. These moments are not the leap, but they are the scaffolding. Each small act of bravery builds the muscle you will one day use to push yourself into the unknown. Standing at the edge, when you finally arrive at the ledge, the world sharpens. You feel the texture of the ground under your feet. You taste the metal in the air. You hear your own heartbeat in your ears. The edge is a teacher. It strips away all illusions about who you are. It does not care for the stories you've told about yourself. It does not care for your rehearsed bravery. Here you are bare, just you, your fear, and the unclaimed sky before you. You will want to stall. You will want to measure the wind, to ask for a sign, to wait for the perfect moment. But the truth is, the edge has only one lesson. You cannot think your way across. It asks for something deeper than logic. It asks for trust, the first unsteady step. The leap does not begin with flight, begins with weight. The moment you push away from the ground, there is a heaviness, as if the earth is reluctant to let you go. Your muscles clench, your breath catches. The body knows it is leaving the known and entering the wide, unmeasured air, and yet, in that heaviness, there is something else as strange, wild exhilaration. The part of you that has been waiting for this moment comes alive. Even if your fear is loud, you don't feel ready. You will never feel ready. But you are already in motion. Freefall, this is the part no one tells you about. The leap feels like falling before it feels like flying. The air rushes past you. The wind takes the words out of your mouth. The old world becomes a blur behind you. Every instinct tells you to reach back toward where you came from, to claw at the disappearing shore. But the leap will not let you go back. The only way is forward, down, through, and in the heart of that free fall, you realize something. The fear was not of falling. The fear was of letting go. And now that you have, there is nothing left to cling to. The air is cold, but it is also clean. The becoming, somewhere in the free fall, something shifts. The panic loosens its grip. The wind becomes less of an enemy and more of a companion. You begin to notice the shape of the world from here, how much wider it looks. When you are no longer standing still, this is when you realize that the leap was never just about crossing a distance. It was about becoming the kind of person who can exist without the safety of the shore. You begin to trust the air to hold you. You begin to trust yourself to navigate what comes next. You begin to trust that, no matter where you land, you will find ground again, landing in the unknown. The leap doesn't end with arrival, it ends with impact. When your feet touch new ground, you might not recognize it. It will feel strange, raw, unfinished. But this is the nature of the unknown. It doesn't welcome you with a map. It gives you a space and asks you to shape it. It hands you the tools of reinvention and waits to see what you will build. Here, you are no longer the person who waited at the shore. You are the person who crossed the gap. The leap has changed the architecture of your courage. The echo, long after the leap, you will still feel it in your bones. The memory of the wind, the moment of weightlessness, the taste of the air before you landed it will stay with you. And here is the quiet truth. Once you have taken one leap, you will see edges everywhere, and every edge will call to you differently. Some you will step away from, others you will approach without hesitation. But you will never again believe that the shore is the only place you belong, becoming the leap. To become the leap is to stop asking for permission from the ground. It is to understand that risk is not a side effect of living, it is the raw material of transformation. It is to see fear not as a stop sign, but as a compass pointing toward the places where your life might expand. It is to know that the moment of flight will not come with guarantees. It is to trust that you will survive the freefall and emerge, not the same, but more yourself than you have ever been. You do not simply take a leap. You become it. You carry it inside you as proof that you can choose movement over stasis, expansion over safety, becoming over remaining. And in that choice, you find not just the other side, but a new way of living entirely. There's a point in every journey when the old world stops making sense, where the steps you thought you had to take suddenly dissolve, and you realize there is no staircase, only the air beneath your feet and the choice to step into it. A quantum leap is not about speed. It's not about working harder or piling more bricks on the wall. It's about stepping into a place where the wall was never there, where the version of you who's been waiting in the distance is already here, breathing with you now. You see, the leap is not from where you are to where you want to be. It's from who you've been to who you truly are. And when you take it, you won't recognize the you who was afraid, because the moment you land, the old you will have never existed in the timeline you now occupy. That's the strange thing about a leap that defies logic once you've crossed it. It feels inevitable, as if the path had always been there, waiting for your courage to see it. So maybe the truth is this: the quantum leap isn't something that happens to you. It's something that happens through you. It's the deep permission to stop negotiating with fear, to stop waiting for perfect conditions, and to start moving as if you've already arrived. Because the leap is not in the distance, it's in this breath, it's in this moment, it's in the part of you that knows, even without proof, that reality will bend to meet the size of your decision. So, if you're standing at the edge tonight, know this: the leap is not only possible, it's already yours. The quantum leap is real. Good night.